Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Monday, February 24th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 497 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate those of you tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms as well. It is Monday, and that means it is mock draft Monday. It is combine week, so the draft is really going to start to take off here over the next couple months before we hit late April, when it all will eventually go down. So today I will reveal my latest mock draft. As always, though, before we begin, we got to get into our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sports book. If you're looking to get in on any of the sports betting action, they also have slots and casinos. Check them out and use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek. If you're looking to get out to any awesome sporting events or any of the best in entertainment, it doesn't have to be sports. It can be plays, concerts, shows, you name it. SeatGeek has it. And at checkout, use code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. And also, of course, our friends over at Huga House. If you want any of their brand new arrival sweatshirts or hats or any of their originals, check them out and get yourself 15% off your first purchase with code BUBS, and you'll get 30% off your second purchase when you use that code BUBS on your first purchase. So check them out and get yourself some awesome Huga House swag. So here we go, episode 497. It is Monday. You know what that means. It is Mock Draft Monday. This is our second edition of the Mock Draft Monday. Been a little bit since we've done one, so excited to get back into this one here. The first one we did was the Mason Graham edition. Today, we're going to take a look at the offensive side of the football. As I do every single episode, I break down different players and do different themes. So today, it is the Tet McMillan episode, as that is who we selected round 1, pick 7. So let's dive right into it. Tet McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona, coming in here at 6'5", 212 pounds, was a junior all 3 seasons at Arizona, and the top wide receiver prospect in this draft. And I don't really think there's much of a debate. There is some really good receivers in this class, and I do think it's a class that has a lot of talent, especially potentially late in the first and even into day 2 and day 3 of the draft. I like a couple of these guys, but if you're talking about pick 7 and he's available, Tet McMillan has got to be one of the most exciting options out there to pair with Garrett Wilson, and it makes a ton of sense for the Jets if he's available, right? This is a Jets team that needs desperate help at the wide receiver position. Devontae Adams gone. You're going to move on from Lazard. You've got Garrett Wilson, and that's it. Xavier Gipson, Malachi Corley, all guys that are at best probably wide receiver 4 special teams guys. You don't really have a number 2, and you don't really have a number 3. You got to go into this draft with it as the Jets, and you've got to think draft a receiver, maybe 2, and then sign a receiver, maybe 2. You got to find a way to come away with probably 3 wide receivers in this offseason. However you get that 3, some combination between the draft, free agency, trades, you go and do it. And Tet McMillan would be a big hit. You look at some of his career numbers in his 3 seasons at Arizona: 213 receptions, 3,423 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 16.1 yards per reception. He has taken off over the last 2 seasons. 1,000 yards in 2023 and 1,000 yards then again this past season in 2024. So over the last 2 years, he's accumulated 2,721 yards and 18 touchdowns, including a 2024 season that saw him produce 84 receptions for 1,319 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 15.7 yards per reception. So big time wide receiver, one of the best in college football, and definitely the best here coming out of this draft. You look at some of his PFF numbers, some of his PFF grades. He had an 84.8 overall grade last year. His receiving grade of 85.8 was near the top of college football. His grade versus man coverage came in at an 89, which was also in the top percentile of college football. His contested catch rate was near the top in college football. And that's one of the most impressive areas for Tet McMillan. When you kind of take a look at some of his strengths and what he's able to bring, one of his biggest attributes is his ability to go up and get contested catches, win the one-on-one ball, kind of be that 70, 30, 80, 20 guy on the 50-50 balls. You look at last season, 18 contested catches was tied for 7th in college football. He also had 472 deep yards, which was 21st. So a guy that deep downfield can be a threat. And even with his build at 6'5", being that bigger receiver, you wouldn't really think of him as a guy that can move around very easily, but he does handle himself pretty well with the body he's got. He actually forced 29 missed tackles last year, which was tied for 3rd in college football. So there was a lot to like, a very well-rounded receiver that brings a lot of attributes. And what I really like most is that ability, again, to go up and catch the 50-50 ball. That is huge. That's a huge thing to have in the red zone, which this team has struggled immensely in the red zone. It feels like for years this team has struggled in the red zone. McMillan can add some of that. So, again, really the top guy. And if you can get him here at 7, I think you've got to love that. I think the biggest threat for McMillan, you look at a team like New England, even a team like Vegas, the teams in front of them there that could really potentially at 4 and 6 that could take him away. But there is a path for him to land there at 7, like this case. You just look at some of his strengths. Again, some of the NFL size frame is there. He actually has an underrated ability to pick up yak, which is, again, impressive for considering he's 6'5", and you wouldn't necessarily think he's that type of guy, but he was. And as I mentioned, the contested catches. Some of the weaknesses, not the fastest of the bunch, kind of expected for what type of receiver he is. He's not really a guy that's going to blow by you. And while he does have a significant number of deep yards, from a route running vertical route perspective, isn't his strongest type of routes to run. Something that he could work on. Mainly plays outside, but in each of his 3 seasons, he had 100+ snaps in the slot. So does have the ability to move inside and outside. So Tet McMillan here, round 1, pick 7, wide receiver out of Arizona. Moving on here, round 2, pick 42. Could go a couple different directions with this one. You want to go defensive line, you want to go safety, you want to go linebacker. That's even a possibility. I think people have got to talk more about the possibility of the Jets selecting a linebacker because they potentially are going to find themselves in a situation where they need a new starter next to Quincy Williams. But we're going to go safety here. One of the biggest needs on this team. And you fill that hole here, and ideally you go out and spend some money in free agency and pick up another safety. We'll go Xavier Watts, safety out of Notre Dame here. 6 foot, 203 pounds, senior out of Notre Dame. Interesting backstory to Xavier Watts. Actually started as a wide receiver in 2020 as a redshirt freshman. Then in 2021, he moved to linebacker. All of this happening at Notre Dame. And then 2022 to now, so the last 3 seasons, has spent playing safety. So interesting background, went offense, wide receiver, 2020, to linebacker, to safety. Interesting, though, his wide receiver background has actually helped him from a ball hawking perspective, his use of hands in coverage, his ball skills. Being a receiver has actually helped him with that transition now to being a safety, with that receiver background. So something to keep note of. I really like Watts. There's a couple different safeties I could see the Jets going here in round 2. Watts is certainly one of my top guys. You look at his 2024 numbers, he had a monster season. He had 83 tackles, which was a career high. He had 9 passes defended, which was a career high, and also produced 6 interceptions. Very good in coverage last season, very productive season. You look at his career numbers, 189 total tackles, 16 passes defended, 13 interceptions. He's also been able to, force 2 fumbles and pick up 2 of his own as well. You look at some of the PFF numbers where they rank. 89.7 overall grade. You look at his coverage grade last year, one of the best of his career. Ranked in the top percentile among safeties with at least 300 or more snaps. And his run defense grade, not as strong as his coverage grade, but well above average and near the top percentile as well among safeties last season with a 79.5. The reason why I like Watts so much for the Jets is a lot of pretty much everything he does is what the Jets struggled with last year and what they have struggled with at that position, right? He's able to produce in coverage, right? That is something that's super, super impressive. Again, that wide receiver background has actually helped him. And you also look at the run defense, kind of an underrated part of his game. He's able to do that as well. The Jets last year missed a ton of tackles. They were not very good in coverage. Watts is able to kind of bring both of those things here on day 2. So an interesting match. Watts is able to also his motor. He's got a high motor, which I think benefits him in the run game as well. Just taking a look at some of the other numbers, his passer rating allowed last year was pretty impressive. Top 20 in college football, ranking at 19th, which was 30.1. And again, that's among safeties with 300 plus snaps. So near the top of college football. Again, so just some of the strengths here. Tackling, I think, is a positive. His ball skills is something that is really, really impressive. Probably the strength of his game in a way. Just mentioned it, the high motor. Can maybe sometimes where his weaknesses do come in, he has a high motor. Sometimes he can over pursue plays. I think there is a part of his game where he's got to notice when to dial it back at certain points. Right, there was certain moments in Quincy Williams' his first year with the Jets where he would over pursue some plays because he brought a lot of speed, but sometimes, he wouldn't be able to kind of settle his feet. That can happen with Watts at times. And sometimes in zone, he'll get caught looking into the backfield and it can cause some, or more so in his zone, not really looking into the backfield, but to the point where he sometimes in his zone, he can get caught looking underneath, something like that. And sometimes can allow things to happen, the play to get behind him a little bit. So something he does have to work on. But overall, I think you look at the strengths, you like him a lot. And a lot of what he does well is what the Jets need at the position. And they need to completely overhaul the safety position because you have Tony Adams probably gone. I mean, he's restricted free agent, but Chuck Clark, Ashton Davis not coming back. You're going to need 2 starters. Ideally, you find one in the draft and you find one in free agency. So we'll go with Watts here, round 2. Round 3, pick 92. We're going to go linebacker here. We're going to go Jeffrey Bassa out of Oregon. 6'2", 235 pounds, senior out of Oregon. Another thing interesting about Bassa, did not start as a linebacker. He started as a safety in 2021, and then he switched to linebacker in 2022. So interesting background there. You look at his career numbers at Oregon, 226 total tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 4 passes defended, 3 interceptions. One of those he was actually able to return back for a pick 6. You look at some of his numbers last year, 54 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, and 2 passes defended. A lot to like, I think, with Bassa just from a size perspective and overall game perspective. Is he elite? No, but I think there is a lot of solid traits to his game that if you can build upon, I think can translate well at the NFL level. Now you look at some of his grades last year, 73.2 overall grade, a 66.8 pass rush grade, a 72.1 run defense grade, and a 70.1 coverage grade. All of those ranking amongst the top 50 percentile, above average in college football. Are they elite? No. Is he in the 90th percentile? No. Is he well above average to the point where he's one of the top linebackers? No, but he was solid. He was above average. And I think for a third-round player, he's got a nice, well-rounded game where solid against the run, does some good things in coverage, pass rushing ability for the most part when he needs to, I think is solid. For the most part, is solid. And you hope that comes to the NFL can develop and turn some of those traits into, I don't know if you're going to get elite traits from a third rounder, but turn traits into really, really good traits where he can kind of turn into and master one specific thing, which right now he doesn't quite do. And again, the Jets need help at linebacker. I don't think people are talking about linebacker enough for the Jets from a draft perspective, where you have Quincy Williams. That's great. Jamien Sherwood, there's a good chance he's not going to come back. I would love Jamien Sherwood back. I listed him in an article I wrote about he's one of the three free agents I think the Jets should prioritize bringing back. But there is a world where he either goes to Saleh in San Francisco or Atlanta with Jeff Ulbrich. And the Jets don't bring him back. And there's a good chance the Jets move on from Mosley. So you would need to fill a hole there. And Jeffrey Bassa could be that guy. You look at some of the strengths. Good size, good in zone coverage. I will overall, for the most part, when it comes to covering his zone, he's solid. Use of hands in coverage is pretty solid, and his tackling is good. Again, there is a lot of positives. Now, some of the weaknesses, he can lack speed on zone run plays. And this is something else, too, with him. At times, he can get his eyes, and I was looking at my notes, and I accidentally said this about Watts. Now, Watts does sometimes struggle with zone awareness, but Bassa can find himself in situations where his eyes get set in the backfield and he loses sight of the play, and either the play gets caught up behind him or he doesn't catch the guy running the slant in front of him, doesn't pick him up. So sometimes that, similar to Watts, that zone awareness, for the most part, he is good in zone, but there is moments where his eyes can get caught in the backfield and he tries to read the quarterback a little too much. And in his zone, there's kind of that bust and they're able to break through and make a play. So that is something that he is going to need to work on at the NFL level. But yeah, I like this pick here. Round 3. I also like Jihad Campbell a lot. If the Jets are willing to do that in round 2, I'd be open for that. But I could definitely see a world where the Jets come away with a linebacker after the first 2 days. And we'll see if that's the case. All right, moving on to day 3 now. I know a lot of people are probably like, where the heck are you going to find a defensive lineman? There's probably many of you might be pulling your hair out because a lot of people, myself included, we need defensive line help. We all know that. We all want them to address that. And that's what I'll do here. Round 4, pick 108. This is one of my favorite defensive linemen post day 2 that the Jets could take here. And this is a pretty strong interior defensive line class. And this is sort of just a PSA in general. I think there's a lot of Jet fans that feel the need to draft a D lineman in the first round. And sure, do you want to go after, trade back and get a Kenneth Grant? You get Mason Graham, who falls at 7. That would be fine. I'd be on board with that. And I can understand, too, taking somebody on day 2. But it's a deep class, and you can find some really good talent, I think, too, in day 3. And Anesis Peebles, defensive lineman out of Virginia Tech, is a name that I really like. Maybe doesn't get through day 2, but if he does, you have to look at him as an early day 3 guy with kind of that day 2 potential where could get drafted day 2, but if you get him on day 3, that's really good value for your pick here. And I think that's the case here. Round 4, day 3, first pick of round 4. I like this potential. 6'1", 290 pounds, senior out of Virginia Tech. Interesting career background. Played at Duke the first 4 years of his career. And then last season transferred to Virginia Tech for his final year, 5th season. So 5 years total. You look at some of his career numbers, 118 total tackles, 12 sacks, 21 tackles for loss. And last season, he produced 30 tackles, 3 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, and 3 passes defended. He was actually able to get his hands on a few balls at the line of scrimmage pretty often in college. You look at some of the PFF numbers coming off of a year where, again, transferred to Virginia Tech and saw some big production just in general. Like he played a lot more snaps defensively, was able to play a couple different areas on the line. He primarily played the A gap and the B gap at Duke. Last year, primarily played the B gap. That's always where he's primarily played. But you also saw him play a little bit more over the tackle and outside of the tackle. So they provided a little bit more of that versatility for him at Virginia Tech last season, which I think is why you saw some of his numbers increase. 89.3 overall PFF grade, was 91.2 pass rush grade, a 78.5 grade against the run, and a 91.3 true pass set rush grade. He also had a very impressive 17.7% pass rush win rate and a 6.3% run stop rate. All of those ranking above average. The pass rush grade, pass rush win rate, and the true pass set pass rush grade was very impressive. All near the top percentile of college football. That's one of his biggest strengths. Very underrated, but his ability to get to the quarterback quickly, win his reps one-on-one, win his battles in the trenches is pretty impressive for a guy that you can get in the 4th round. Some of his strengths: quick first step, pass rushing ability, versatility, like I mentioned, especially this last year at Virginia Tech. You saw them line him up a little bit more outside the tackle, over the tackle. Primarily at Duke, it was A gap or B gap. This year, you saw him line up a little bit more at those other spots, which can translate well to the NFL, where he's not only going to be in the same spot all the time. If you can get some of that versatility, I think that's positive. And he's well-rounded. Again, I do think his ability against the run solid. His pass rushing ability is the biggest strength. Against the run needs some help, and we'll get to that here with the weaknesses. He does need to improve his size. He's a little undersized, and his lower body strength, again, 6'1", 290, a little bit undersized for an interior defensive lineman. And one of his areas that he does need to improve, and you would think the NFL would help with this, just the training system, the weight, all that stuff. He does need to put on a little bit more size, especially the lower body strength. Can sometimes struggle against the run, kind of anchoring down, holding his spot against the run, just because of slightly undersized. I think something in the NFL, if you can put on that NFL size, you could start to see, I think, better production against the run. But the pass rush, the IQ, and the versatility, I think, are 3 things that you saw a lot of last year, Virginia Tech, just watching a couple of his games so far, and you hope can translate to the NFL. And they need help next to Quinnen. It's the biggest reasoning of this all. They need help next to Quinnen Williams. What Joe Douglas did to this line was criminal. You need to fix it. So, Anesis Peebles, D-line out of Virginia Tech. Round 5, pick 145. Couple different tight ends I really like in this draft. Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green, I really like. He is more of your receiving tight end. I also like Terrence Ferguson, who we talked about in our first mock draft a lot. He is more of your blocking tight end, which I actually think fits well to this system that Tanner Engstrand is going to run, similar to a Detroit where they use their tight ends as blockers often. So I'm going to go with another blocking tight end, and that is Mitchell Evans, tight end out of Notre Dame. Now, Fannin Jr. and Ferguson were not on the board here. I think those are more guys that you would probably have to look at with that 4th round pick as opposed to 5th round pick. I think those guys are probably going to go earlier day 3 than later. Mitchell Evans, I think, should fall here to 5, maybe at highest 4th, but I think you're really looking at probably a 5th round grade for him out of Notre Dame. 6'5", 260 senior. Started to take off really last year and even more so this season, 2023 and 2024. Unfortunately for Evans, he's got a little bit of injury history. Tore his ACL in 2023, which ended his season early. Again, was having a massive, massive season and then tore his ACL and it ended. One of the things that is a little bit of a concern, right? Anytime you see a prospect with an injury like that, especially to a position like tight end, it can be a little bit concerning. But I think to kind of outweigh that concern is he put together a very good 2024. 43 receptions, 421 yards, 3 touchdowns. And his season combined with last year and 2023, he had 72 receptions, 843 yards, and 4 touchdowns. You saw a lot of good things. I think last year you also saw him turn more into or show more of an ability as a pass catcher than what he did in his previous seasons. And you look at some of the numbers, 65.3 overall PFF grade. His run block grade was 60.7, which actually ranks well above average. His receiving grade, again, 65.9, is just about average. He's kind of that average receiving tight end. But very solid run blocking ability. His drop rate, 6.5%, is a little high, slightly below average. Contested catch rate of 72.7% is actually one of his biggest strengths. And that is one of his biggest abilities as a pass catcher is he's very solid in the red zone, which I also think is smart. Now, Evans isn't my top guy from a tight end perspective. I like Terrence Ferguson a lot personally. I've dug into him a lot more. And he was in the first mock draft that we did. And kind of after that, I started to dig in on him a lot more. I like him a lot. I think he is probably out of the three middle round tight ends, Fannin Jr., at the place where the Jets would probably be picking a tight end, Fannin Jr., Ferguson, Mitchell Evans. I like Ferguson the most. Fanning, from a receiving perspective, like him the most. But I do think Ferguson just a little bit more well-rounded. That's just me. Evans I like. But I do think you've got to get a little bit, you want to see more production, hopefully, from a pass catching perspective. Now, again, the contested catches is impressive. He had 8 contested catches last year, which was tied for 8th in college football. And he also had that 72.7% contested catch rate, which translates well in the red zone, which is one of my favorite parts about him. And why I think he could fit here is that ability to block, which is good. One of his biggest strengths, good for this scheme, is blocking, and his ability to make plays in the red zone. Because the Jets need better production out of their tight ends in the red zone. I mean, Tyler Conklin, if we're being honest, has been a non-factor in the red zone in his 3 years. Not all his fault. A lot of it's the quarterbacks, but that needs to change. Evans did that in college, and you hope he could potentially provide that here. He's also got a high football IQ. Now, some of his weaknesses, yards after catch, which is interesting because he actually forced 9 missed tackles last year, which was tied for 22nd in college football, but not really a big yak guy. Typically, when a guy forces a lot of missed tackles, he's usually a big yak guy. Mitchell Evans is in that case. His route tree needs some help, and we talked about the injury history. He's a very good blocking tight end and a good in the red zone. Other than that, he needs some more seasoning as a receiver. Round 5, take a flyer on him, and then potentially you sign somebody else, a veteran, to come in here. So that's Mitchell Evans. 3 more picks. Round 5, pick 157. So just 12 picks later, we're going to go back to the well on defense, and we're going to take Ja Joyner, edge, out of Minnesota. 6'5", 265 pounds, senior. And man, you look at Joyner, he has taken off the last 2 years at Minnesota. 2023 and 2024, he generated 50 tackles, 12 sacks, and 14 tackles for loss. And in 2024, he produced another productive season for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, where he had 32 tackles, a career high, 4.5 sacks, and even 7 passes defended. Very lengthy. And some of his PFF numbers, 76.7 overall grade, a career high. Had a 75.4 pass rush grade, 75.4 run defense grade, and a 71.2 true pass rush grade. Pass rush win rate of 13.2% and a run stop rate of 5.2%. also slightly below average. Primarily plays the edge, of course, outside. Doesn't have a lot of experience of jumping into the interior. And I do think if you would go like the jaw joiner route, I think you would probably look down the road of trying to, again, you want some guys with versatility too. So I think Peebles is kind of that versatility guy. Jaw joiners, more of your just prototypical outside tackle edge guy. Some of his strengths, his size, again, 6'5", he's lengthy and he's very explosive. He's got some good speed. And things of that nature. One of his weaknesses, the gap integrity against the run isn't great. And I just mentioned it. He does have a run stop rate of just 5.2%. I'm interested to see how the Jets address their run stuffer situation. Like, they need a run stuffer. Do they address that during the draft, or do they go more of your pass rushers in the draft and then find a run stuffer in free agency? There's a couple run stuffers that'll be out there for cheap that can come in, that have connections to Aaron Glenn actually, and slot in for this Jets team. Peebles and Joyner aren't necessarily your run stuffers. Peebles, I think can become a better run stuffer than he is now, just because I think if he puts on NFL size, that's his biggest issue. It's not necessarily technique, it's just size, which you can put on more size, of course, in the NFL. Joyner, I think that's just the way he is, the way he's built. He's just your prototypical pass rushing edge rusher. And the Jets could use some depth at edge. You have Jermaine Johnson, you have Will McDonald, but you got some questions outside of those two guys. And you also have Jermaine Johnson coming off a torn Achilles. I fully believe he can come back, but you always have questions, and you are curious if he would get off to a slow start next year to knock off the rust. Can he be a guy, can you draft a guy to come in and kind of take over that load for a little bit next season? So Jaw Joyner, edge out of Minnesota. Final two picks here. I personally really, really like this pick. This is probably one of my actually favorite picks I made. Of course, outside of Tet McMillan, because if he falls there at 7 and the Jets select him, I think that's a home run to pair with Garrett Wilson. But round 6, 185, we're going to go with Johnny Cornelius, tackle out of Oregon. I like this pick a lot. And I'm actually going to show you the PFF official draft here after this. And they didn't love this pick, but I personally really like it. And I'm not against some of the other offensive tackles. I'm not at all. But the Jets need a right tackle. There is a ton of people looking at left tackles. And I'm not against drafting a Will Campbell, who primarily played left tackle. I'm not against that. But I do think it is beneficial if you can find a guy who can come in here, sit for a season, still sign a stopgap as your right tackle this year for 2025, and then have your right tackle sit behind him. I'm on board with drafting a guy that plays right tackle, not a left tackle that needs to come in here and learn right tackle. I think it'd be beneficial if you can find a guy that plays right tackle and you bring him in to be a right tackle. And I think there's a lot of Jet fans out there that are like, oh, draft, we need a left tackle. Like, that's not true. Olu plays left tackle. They need a right tackle. And Cornelius has a ton of experience at right tackle. His entire collegiate career was spent at right tackle. 719 snaps in 2022 at right tackle. 889 in 2023 and 939 in 2024. Last year was the only year he took snaps at another position not named right tackle. And those positions were 1 snap at left tackle, 2 at left guard, and 1 at right guard. So it's not even like he played left tackle for a full game. This is a right tackle. The Jets need a right tackle. Yes, he's a 6th round pick. Yes, he's got to get, needs some work. But that's why I think you bring him in, you sign a stopgap veteran, or trade for a guy like Jack Conklin for a year, and then Cornelius can maybe take over next season in 2026. So I like Cornelius here as a developmental option. I like the experience at right tackle, and I do like some of his tape and some of the things he brings to the table. Very strong run blocker, good from a zone blocking perspective. He's a very good gap blocker as well. Technique-wise, in those run and zone situations, I think are very big positives. Does need some work as a pass blocker. Run blocking is certainly the strength of his game, which the Jets need. And then you bring this guy in here with experience playing the position, can sit a year in season. So that's our 6th round pick. Final pick of the draft. This is an interesting one. I figured, you know what? I went into this draft and I said, you know what? I'm going to go a little bit outside, think outside the box. We've talked a lot about Dart, a lot about McCord. Right, we've talked a little about Riley Leonard. I think we took him in the last draft. Instead of going with all the ones we talk about all the time, I'm going to go with a different quarterback. I'm going to go Tyler Shaw, quarterback out of Louisville. This guy is getting a ton of hype, is getting a ton of excitement. And I'll be honest, the combine week's going to be big for him. There's a chance we walk out of combine week and he is maybe getting the hype that Jackson Dart's getting. That's how much this guy, he's like breaking through right now with hype. You're starting to see it build. So I figure we take him here around 6-206. You look at right now the draft and like where he's ranked. I think you can get him here. Maybe you have to pick him at 185. I didn't. He was available at 206. The biggest thing with Tyler Shaw is 6'5", 225 pounds senior, but that doesn't tell the whole story. He played 7 seasons in college football, 25 years old. And that does, in a way, kind of take away some people's excitement for him. Like, he's 25 years old. Are you really going to bring in a guy that's 25 to sit for a year or so, and then at like 26, because he'll be 26 when the season starts, he'll be 27 when the 2026 season starts? Are you really, if you get what I'm saying, there is that amongst, organizations and stuff. Do you want to take a guy that old, right? And take a flyer on him, especially this late. But you look at the way he reads the field, you look at some of the throws he makes, there's a lot of NFL caliber things that he does, and he's very smart. He's got a high football IQ. Now, a lot of that's because he played 7 seasons in college football, 3 at Oregon, 3 at Texas Tech, and then last year at Louisville. He had his best year last year at Louisville. I'm not as high on him as everybody else is. I still think if the Jets are going to draft a quarterback, you should draft the guy, I think, in the middle rounds as opposed to waiting now. A Dart, a McCord, a you, or somebody like that. But Tyler Shaw's out there, and he is gaining some steam. There is a lot of good traits. The age is a factor. We'll see. But take him here in round 6. 23 touchdowns last season. So that's it. Mock Draft Monday in the books. Let's take a look at the draft now. One more time. Throw it up on the screen. Round 1, pick 7, Tet McMillan. Got an A for that from PFF. Round 2, pick 42, Xavier Watts, A-. Round 3, pick 92, Jeffrey Bassa, B+. Round 4, pick 108, Anesis Peebles, A-. Round 5, pick 145, Mitchell Evans, B. Next 2 picks, PFF didn't love. Round 5, pick 157, Ja Joyner. They gave me a C there. And in round 6, 185, Johnny Cornelius, they gave me a C. I personally think the Cornelius pick is very good. I would totally be on board with the Jets drafting a guy that played right tackle in college. If they're going to go that route in the middle rounds, Cornelius did that. There are certainly some other guys, Purdue tackle, that did that. But that's where we took here, round 6, Cornelius. I also like Holland Pierce, too, from Rutgers, is a name that I like a lot that PFF doesn't like for the Jets. Sometimes that happens. Round 6, 206, Tyler Shaw, A-. So overall, PFF gave me an A- overall draft grade. Top 37% of Jets drafts. So I'll ask you this question as we part on a Monday. What are your thoughts on this draft? Do you like it? What would you do differently? Ultimately, what do you feel about Tet McMillan? Because it is the Tet McMillan edition. And that's another mock draft. We'll be back next week with another mock draft. Of course, a ton of content in between then. And appreciate you all so much for tuning in. Let me know what you think about this version of the Mock Draft Monday. We'll talk to you soon. Until next time, JETS Jets. By the way, actually, one more thing. Glenn and Muji will speak tomorrow at the Combine, so we'll have an episode up out on that. So I'm looking forward to that because it's going to be nice to actually talk about things of a little bit more substance than just mock drafts or just free agency rumors. It's going to be nice to hear Glenn and Muji speak. Now you really kind of get into the meat and potatoes because the introductory press conference is one thing. Now it's like, all right, Combine's here. Free agency is just a couple weeks away. Now it's like, all right, what's your plan? Who are you looking at? All that stuff. So we should get a lot of good things coming out of tomorrow. So we'll be back for that. So anyway, again, JETS, Jets. Talk to you guys soon.